Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is, let me just set this up. As an hour ago, the official kick people of color off the voting rolls commission started their hearings or whatever here in Washington, D.C. 1 hour ago. Greg Palast is on the line with us, the investigative journalist, author, filmmaker, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, which you can watch cheap over at Amazon.com and GregPalast.com for all the information. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T. Hey, Greg, welcome back.
I'm glad to be with you. And by the way, the voters of color, their color is blue. That's what they're afraid of.
So, well, tell us about this then. Go for it.
Okay. About 1 hour ago, the Trump's commission on what he calls the Voter Fraud Commission, or as he puts it, or as it's officially called, the President's Advisory Commission on Voter Integrity began its operation. This is Kris Kobach. We've talked about the Trump's vote thief in chief before, the Secretary of State of Kansas. This is their first meeting. Basically, well, I'm smiling and chuckling about it. The truth is they're rewriting the nation's voting laws to make sure that voters of color, and the color is blue that they don't want, will be pushed off the ballot. And the way that they do it is they push off voters of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian American off the voter rolls because they vote blue. And it just started. It's very funny because they had a swearing-in ceremony. You have to understand this is an advisory council. You don't get swearing-in ceremonies. It's not. They're not being appointed to the cabinet. They're not. They have no congressional authority, and they're not the Illuminati or the Masons.
So they're like pretending it's a real thing.
Yeah, it's like pretending. Did you see Raiders of the Lost Ark? Remember when the Nazis put on all this Jewish prayer garb so they could
right.
read the tablets?
So they could open the ark.
Kind of what's going on here. It's this weird ritual, but it's like in a way it's kissing Trump's mistletoe. So what's happening, and this commission, which is nominally headed by Mike Pence, not exactly your civil rights leader, our vice president, but it's run by Kris Kobach, the Secretary of State of Kansas. And they've begun with statements about how that the issue here in America is voter fraud. That is, people voting illegally. And in particular, Kris Kobach was pounding on his favorite topic, I guess mine too by default because I investigate him, is cross-check. He's saying that he found 118 people voting twice in his state, and maybe 18,000. Now, you have to understand, he in his state, he has powers to prosecute. He hasn't prosecuted 18 people for voting twice. It is a crime. You go to jail. And he certainly hasn't prosecuted 18,000. So what's going on here? Well, as you know, I have his lists. And his double voters are people like, I kid you not, Jose Garcia, who's voted apparently in several states under different middle names, sometimes junior, sometimes senior. Now, and I know you're thinking, wait, Jose Garcia is just a common name, not for Republican. So they're you can laugh at it as Looney Tunes, but this is deadly serious.
This is how these guys are planning on nailing down the Republican control of the United States, as more and more people have figured out that the Republican Party is the wholly owned subsidiary of the Koch network, the petro-billionaires, and the hard right. And the transnational corporate elite. I mean, that's pretty much it. But they,
you have to understand, Kobach. After our research for our film and for Rolling Stone, we uncovered that Kobach received $100,000 cash from the Koch brothers. So this is whom he owes. That's his real employer, not his government job in the Secretary of State of Kansas. The money comes from people like Koch, and this is very dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
When we have people who are rewriting the voter laws, funded by billionaires, who actually find vote suppression of voters of color to be a profit center. Right now, and they have right next to Kobach to create to have a blackface. They have Ken Blackwell is on the commission. You may remember him as the guy who swiped the state of Ohio in 2004 from John Kerry through every trick in the book, from long lines to rejecting ballots from black areas where people mailed in their absentee ballots on the wrong weight of paper which he had handed out to the black voters in these precincts. It was just amazing. So this is the guy that. So that's their balance. In other words, their idea of balance is right-wing Republicans who are white and right-wing Republicans who are black. That's their idea of a racial, of kind of the rainbow coalition there.
We're talking with Greg Palast, investigative journalist, filmmaker, author. His new movie, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, is mind-boggling. You gotta check it out. GregPalast.com. Greg, I want to play a short clip from Paul Weyrich, the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, and a whole bunch of other things from the summer of 1980 when he was working on the Reagan campaign. Here he is.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Now, that was 1980. That was
Reagan's
37 years ago, right?
Yep.
And what is the arc of Republican voter suppression from then till now?
Well, what happens, that's how we had Reagan, but remember, it's a very different electorate. Most voters were white males, no longer true. And one of the things that's happened now is Kris Kobach has picked up that he's the vote thief in chief for Donald Trump. Look, let's be blunt. To pick up from Weyrich, is that there's just not enough white guys to elect a guy like Donald Trump or his Republican Congress. So what they have to do is they have to come up with various gimmicks to stop voters of color from voting. We've talked about cross-check, but they have many others. In fact, the latest thing we have from Kris Kobach, he had a secret meeting with Donald Trump in January before the inauguration. He handed Trump what he thought would be a secret memo. We now have a copy through a lawsuit from the ACLU, and it's what I predicted it would be exactly, a plan to amend into oblivion what's called the National Voter Registration Act.
That's the Motor Voter Act.
Voter law. The Motor Voter
makes it easy to register to vote when you get your driver's license renewed.
You get your driver's license. He wants to add a provision that you prove you're a citizen. Now, at first you say, well, yeah, only American citizens ought to vote. But go ahead, Tom, prove you're a citizen. The main proof of citizenship in the United States is a passport. That's automatic proof.
Which is only held by like 4 or 5% of Americans, right?
Who has passports? Rich white people, and for the most part, homies don't in South Central LA don't have their passports from their trips to the Alps. What we do have, and then the other is a certified copy of your registration. Now, he took this little citizenship test business on a test drive in his own state of Kansas, Mr. Kobach. And he was able to knock out 36,000 students off the voter rolls who couldn't prove, because they couldn't get their certified original birth certificates, students in Lawrence, Kansas, who couldn't prove that they were citizens of the United States. Before, by the way, you just check a box. Are you a citizen? Yeah, I am. If you're lying, you're going to go to prison. People don't lie because they don't want to go to prison over such a silly little thing.
Right.
But it worked, and then a federal judge says, hey, Kobach, you haven't proved that one single person among the 36,000 you blocked to vote are non-citizens. You haven't proven that. You haven't shown me one. And so the judge said, put those people back on the voter rolls under the National Voter Registration Act. That's what the judge relied on. Unfortunately, there is no right to vote in the United States Constitution, by the way. And therefore, if Kobach changes that voter law, there ain't nothing between Trump and re-election. And, because we're going to have a very shrunk electorate. Go ahead, prove you're a citizen. We know who's going to get knocked out by this. We know who's going to get challenged. We did have Karen Handel, if you remember, she was the one who just won the special race against John Ossoff.
Right, and she was formerly the Secretary of State of Georgia, responsible for cleaning the voting rolls.
And what she did was she was sending out letters to people with Hispanic last names, a guy named Morales, who 3 times was required to spend an entire day in a courtroom, this American, proving he was an American. And his only crime was having a Hispanic last name. So this is no joke. This new ethnic cleansing by computer. What you have is lynching by laptop. This is what they want to make the law of the nation, and it's no joke. They are pulling it off. And so we're trying to raise the alarm. I was just this weekend with the Reverend Jesse Jackson and this senator named Bernie Sanders, who decided to, I was with them in a private discussion, deciding that they would form an alliance to try to block Kobach, to try to block Crosscheck. They're bringing in the top experts like, I don't know if you should know Barbara Arnwine, the nation's one voting attorney, voting rights attorney. It's going to be a campaign, hard fought, but, you know, for Jesse Jackson, as far as he was concerned, this is no different than the march from Selma to Montgomery.
Oh, well, that's, you know, Joe Madison makes this point all the time. It's no longer Jim Crow. It's James Crow Esquire.
Yeah, exactly. They're using, in other words, they're not in your face. They're not rednecks who's saying we don't like, you know, N people. They just know that they don't like the color of their votes. And they're using very sophisticated methods. And these claims of voter fraud. Remember, they never say, oh, yeah, a lot of white Republicans are committing voter fraud. Though it's interesting, Kobach has actually convicted 4 people of voter fraud. They're all Republicans. But they never mention that. What they're saying is it's the hordes of dark-skinned folk who they're targeting. And I'm not guessing because I have the list of people that Kris Kobach has targeted, at least by this system.
So what can people do, Greg? We have just a minute here before we're going to hit a hard break. What can people do?
Okay, what can people do? Well, go to gregpalast.com and get the information on Kobach and his cronies. My Rolling Stone article is up there, and other investigations I've done on Kobach. And
Mark Pocan has dropped legislation to stop this. In the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a huge campaign. Go to the site. We have a little film with Bernie Sanders and with Jesse Jackson. I think you'll want to see this to know what the fight's about.
I agree. It's brilliant. I watched it this morning. Greg Palast, you're doing God's work, my friend. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you can check it all out at gregpalast.com, GregPalast, and you can tweet Greg at Greg_Palast. We'll be right back.